Hi, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. Today is an exciting show. We are continuing our conversations on equity in nonprofits, but we're going to take a different angle today. Me and my co host, Peter Blakely, and we are expecting Rebecca to zoom on in here, are going to take the issue from the perspective of employees. You all know that we tend to wear different hats when we have a conversation. But one thing we have in common is that we all work with organizations and we listen to what staff are saying. Another thing, we've all been employees ourselves. And so, what we want to do is take on an issue and ask the question, are we being equitable in this topic? So if you are a leader of a nonprofit organization, this is a great time to use this show as a benchmark on how you're doing in your equity journey. Or if you have not begun, you might want to think about surveying your staff and asking them things that we're going to talk about today. So please join us at Coffee Time for Masterminds, which is a 30-minute show with nonprofit leaders and for nonprofit leaders of mission-based organizations. I want to introduce my co-host, Peter Blakely. Hi, Peter. How are you?
Good morning, Cynthia. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
And I am Peter Blakely. I am the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Great. Okay. We are missing Rebecca. I'm sure she will show up. But Rebecca Tuttle, I hope that she joins us, and she is the principal and finder of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good. Okay. So let's start talking about equity. The first question, and I told you that I wanted, when I was preparing for the show, I told the co-host, I want to be a little provocative. I'm going to give you a topic and I want us to talk about honestly, is there an opportunity for equitable practice in that area? And yes, I see comments already. If you are watching us, please tell us your name and where you're from. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Renee.
Peter, my first word, tattoos. Can we talk about tattoos in the workplace?
Yes, I love tattoos.
You love tattoos. Okay. The truth of the matter is, and I love to watch body art. I don't have tattoos, but I love the courage that it takes to put that on your body and really display beautiful, beautiful artwork. But there are organizations that do not allow it and go through great lengths to get their employees to hide it. And then there are organizations that don't mind. And the truth of the matter is, it's rare to find somebody who doesn't have a tattoo. So let's talk about tattoos.
You know, I once worked in an organization where, they weren't allowed. They had this idea of how workers in this setting should look. Hi, Rebecca.
Good morning.
Hi. Grant Writing never sleeps. I'm sorry I'm late, everybody.
That's okay. We introduced you, Rebecca, but if you want to introduce yourself, you can.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Rebecca Tuttle. I'm the founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good. How are you?
Good. The work of a consultant never ends. So we started with tattoos, and Peter was talking about tattoos in the workplace. So go ahead.
So here's what I think is going on when an organization says no tattoos. They've formulated a picture of what like a neutral or normal or professional or typical person looks like. And they're making this assumption that having the employees look like that is going to make all of the customers more comfortable. And that's, basically classist, racist, heteronormative, right? It's this like, oh, there is a standard of people and we're more comfortable with those kinds of people. Those aren't the people that you got to go out of your way to make more comfortable, right? So, if your organization should be serving people who wear tattoos, right? Then your staff should have tattoos, right? I think it's about
interesting.
Right.
That is interesting. Way to say it.
We're the healthcare provider that does not want to serve people with tattoos. Well, then who are you excluding, right? So, or who are you not going out of your way to make comfortable here? And how are you letting one aesthetic become the standard, right? And what's baked
I
into that.
love that.
Yeah. So I think that applies to a lot of things about people's appearance.
Yeah. Rebecca, I know you had strong opinions about tattoos also.
Well, a tattoo is an expression of your personality. So
Yeah.
it's not just that people, slap on a tattoo. There's meaning behind it. Sometimes they have tattoos in memory of people they love.
Yep.
So I think when we disallow artistic expression on our body, which is a tattoo, right?
Mhm.
We're sort of putting a roadblock for people's expression of who they are themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so many organizations talk about bringing your whole self to work. And I mean, in the most fundamental way, that's saying like your whole self. Only certain selves, right?
Just don't bring your arms.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the same way, right? So this idea of tattoos being having a negative connotation, that's back in the day where we would stereotype and have bias. Now it's too normalized in our society. It's just a new way of being, right? And you're right, Peter, in that you can't bring your whole self to work if you have to wear makeup to hide your whole self.
Right.
And so
the makeup. We could just talk about makeup.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of women and femme presenting people feel like they have to wear makeup, or that's not professional. And to some extent, are we obscuring what we actually look like?
Right. And so where's the equity in that? Or where's the lack of equity? For me, it's about acceptance, right? When we're not accepting people for who they are and how they show up in the world, then we assume that there's another way of existing that's better. To me, that's lack of equity. What does it mean for you, Peter? The equity part in tattoos.
It's holding a standard of an ideal worker that looks like a straight white man from 1950.
Right.
And, maintaining this idea that the more we can be like that, right, the better we are as workers. And the further we are from that, the more problematic or flawed or in need of fixing. And I think one of the great promises of the COVID era is going to be that we have to abandon that fiction that people are, perfect workers, and that when people are at work, the rest of their lives just disappears, right? We've spent a year now where a lot of us white collar workers are in each other's houses and living rooms all the time, and we can no longer pretend that people don't have families and home lives and pets and religious lives and like all of the things that you see in the background when people are on Zoom or on Facebook Live.
Yeah. Rebecca, what's the equity part in the issue around tattoos and makeup and appearances?
Well, I mean, just to Peter's point, and then piggybacking both of these, what we're seeing is more relaxation, more reality of what work is, right? It's almost like loosen up your arms, right? Everyone chill out, right?
Yeah.
Work is not so stiff. We don't go to work like a robot, And I think what's happened is when we allow people to show up with tattoos, with crazy hair color, and allow them to express who they are, right? You shouldn't hide who you are in the workplace when that's who you are on the weekend, right? However you sit at your dinner table, you may have different conversation at the dinner table than at the lunch table at work, but that's still an expression of who you are. So you should be able to go to work that way, because that's who you are. Because otherwise what happens is it creates unnecessary stress, because you're always wondering, can they see my tattoo? Is my hair a little crazy today? Will they judge my outward appearance for who I am on the inside? And I think COVID has taught us that if you're going to come into my home, right, even if it's virtual, you're invading my personal space with work, then you're going to see me for who I really am.
Right.
during work. And I think that's great. I think that because we were forced into working this way, we're seeing more equitable work environments come about because we have no other choice. Not that we didn't want that, right? But we have no other choice. You either accept your employees for who they are and what they bring and all that greatness, that artistic expression, or we're at a point now where employees, where they used to be at the mercy of their employer, now have a lot of other options for work, right? I mean, look at entrepreneurism. It's booming right now.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, so
And I would even go further than to say like tattoos are too common now. And that's, that's why we should accept them and say, what if we just ran with the perception that tattoos are associated with sailors and sex workers? I'm going to challenge us to say that's still okay, right? That even if people are sailors or sex workers, they are still people deserving of employment opportunities or deserving of service at our locations. So
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Another topic that has come up is hair. My God, I've had more conversations about hair in my lifetime than any other topic. And so, but the difference is that a lot of the conversations are about hair of Black and brown people. And so when we were preparing for the show, Peter had talked about the Crown Act and how some states, tell me if I'm right, are passing the Crown Act. Or
yes, only a couple of states have passed Crown Acts.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the Crown Act is hoping to do?
So it is, there are lots of employers who discriminate against different types of natural hair, curly hair, traditional hairstyles like braids, locks, and twists. There are employers that don't allow them. And so it has recently been an area of legislation to say you can't do that. You can't forbid employees to wear their hair the way it grows out of their head.
Right.
The fact that this is a big deal in 2021 is, pretty incredible. But it was, it was radical when Ayanna Pressley went to DC with her braids. That was radical. Now she wears a ball head, and that's radical. People have a lot to say about how women, especially women of color, present themselves, right? There are lots of people who still think that curls, twists, braids are not professional. And I say, if you are wearing those in professional settings, they're professional, right? That's your hair.
Yeah, I love messy curly hair. For me,
I wish I could have curly hair. Mine is like straight and then static. I don't know if you ever see in the show, my hair sometimes takes flight because of the static. I think hair and makeup and all of this expression we're talking about, I think that's what makes people so interesting and different and unique. And I think hair, I think tattoos, I think how people present themselves, that's a great opportunity for conversation, to get to know people, find out what their interests are, right? If we all hung around with people who looked exactly like us and spoke exactly like us, and we were all in the same uniform, life would be so incredibly boring, don't you think?
Yeah. But it goes again to having established one standard of beauty.
Yeah. So we're coming. So what we've been talking about is really themes related to appearance. And so one of the things that leaders can do is bring their staff together and talk about what that means to them and what it means, or how important is it that they bring their whole self to work. And you'll see that a lot of it has to do with how they dress or what they wear, including their hair, including their tattoos.
It's incredible that we hire adults and expect them to do grown-up things, but
I know. What a high expectation.
I feel like we have to tell them how to get dressed.
Right.
We trust you
Yep.
to administer healthcare or, mental health services or something like that, but we're gonna have to give you some guidance on wearing pants,
I have to tell you, I worked in HR for a long time and I talked a lot about dressing. Not so much about, I think there is dressing that could be inappropriate depending on what it's showing. And when you're working with the outside world, right, that can be offensive to some people. But also it may send a message that you don't want to send, and that is, I'm far more relaxed and I'm gonna show everything. And it's not the place, and there's always a place for that. So there's a lot of conversation around that, and I'm sure
Yeah.
there's some equity in that as well, right? But there's also the line around when we are client facing, right? How do
And
we
that,
want to
well,
show up in that role?
it's easy to cross a line there from policing the clothes to policing their bodies. So
Nice.
you might put exactly the same garment on, women of different shapes, and they're going to look more revealing, or we're going to perceive it as more revealing and more sexual on a curvier body. Curvier bodies are sometimes Black and brown bodies.
Right.
And so particularly girls of color tend to, get policed more around their clothing.
Yes. Yes. And I've had managers speak to, especially to their staff, saying things like, you should not wear a short skirt.
Right.
Right? And they were talking to a Black and brown person.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, if you don't want people to wear short skirts, because when you sit, it lifts and you sit in front of the client, then
Yeah.
that's a policy that runs across.
That just needs to be everybody.
Yes, it is not about whether one person has more hips or not.
Right.
It is about that value.
But think
Rebecca,
about, Renee has a comment.
yes,
I don't want to
please.
bring it up because I'd love you to read it, but think about how the person receiving that must feel. I have been criticized for the way I dress at work, and it threw my entire day off. And I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't realize something was wrong with my outfit. Now I'm so humiliated, and I can't get through the rest of the day, but I have
Right.
to.
And it makes me think like, here I was trying to do these, challenging work things. And the only thing you're noticing about my presence and effort here today is, this one skirt, right? It's incredibly demoralizing.
It is. Here, I'll pull
and I
Renee's comment.
recently, I used to call these kinds of things microaggressions, right? Comments about my hair. I still receive comments about my hair and people suggesting that it would look better straight. Yeah. Right. But I recently read an article that challenged me to call it what it is, which is an attack on an individual's dignity.
Wow.
That is what it is, essentially, right? It hurts.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And a comment that implies that like somebody's skirt is the most important thing about their presence at work today, that I think that's an attack on their dignity. So.
Right. Yeah. All right, Renee, what are you saying?
You want to read it, Cynthia?
Sure.
Yeah, I love that we in the workplace promote thinking outside the box. So now people are expressing themselves through creativity of body expressions. That is very true.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Very, very true. I know someone who works out, and she has the best looking biceps I have ever seen. And almost every dress she wears is sleeveless. And I happen to like nice biceps, right? But I am sure, and I've never asked her because it's not my business, but I am sure she's gotten some comments about that because people feel strongly about women wearing muscles. And so, but you should think about how you're having that conversation. It's what Peter said. I love that. It's about challenging somebody's dignity.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to time off and holidays. Let's talk holidays.
Yeah.
Our holidays, this is really interesting. And you know what? It's probably true in every country, but because our country was founded on the idea of diversity, this the sentiment that the westernized holidays are much more appreciated through days off than other holidays is
Yeah.
an issue. When people practice differently from this American ideal, they have to take their own personal days off
Mhm.
versus
Right.
using it for their holidays. Let's talk about holidays. What are your thoughts?
I
Yeah.
think that if it's a
Yeah.
holiday, you should not be working on a holiday because it's a holiday and the work can stop for a day.
It
You
can.
know,
Does
What
everybody
if
get
unless
the same holidays or does everybody pick their own?
I was just thinking that? What if organizations said everybody gets 11 days to celebrate holidays, you get to pick yours?
that's really
That's how I would
interesting.
do it. That's how I would do
Yeah.
it. I mean, um, there is no particular reason why somebody can't work Christmas Day and then take another day off, assuming that we trust people to do their work and that their supervisor doesn't have to watch them do it. I don't see why that would be an issue. You know,
Yes,
you should do
especially if
their
you
own.
do not observe that holiday.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
You know,
And some people have to work on those holidays in the medical
Mhm.
field.
right.
We see that in the grocery stores, but what we did for our teams was we offered double time and a half pay on holidays. And then if you worked beyond your 40 hours, then you got time and a half. I think making sure that we still do those kinds of things is important.
Yep.
I had a headhunter reach out to me and they were describing the job, the opportunity. And so I said, oh, I'll take an interest, whatnot. They wanted, okay, girls, hold on to your chairs. They wanted 120 grants written per year and 50 to 70 hours per week of work. Now, right? And I'm thinking, so I said, that's a lot. That's a lot of grants to write in a year for any one person. And that's a lot of hours to put in.
yeah.
So imagine that scenario. Do you really think that they're taking holiday time off or picking their own holidays? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
It's just
I'm shocked by that.
yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Having a business model that doesn't work. If you can't write a job description that fits into, a normal number of working hours or a normal output, then your business plan isn't working, right?
Yeah.
You need to rethink that.
And just imagine, it takes about 40 hours to produce a great grant application, right? 40 is the minimum number of hours between everything that it entails. Think one person working, we're supposed to be 37 hours a week / 50 to 70, 120 grants per year at 40 hours per proposal. That's not even enough time in the year, right? So I think what I'm getting at is we have to do away, much like the stiff, work expectation is if you can get your work done well and you can get it done in a reasonable amount of time and still respect the rules of the organization and your responsibilities, I think that we have to allow and continue to allow more flexibility in the workplace. And I love the idea of if you don't observe certain holidays, then select your own 11 days off. I think that would be a great idea. But I also think it would reduce the infighting that occurs when, the boss gets automatically those days off. And the people who are, boots on the ground, they don't get those days off, or they have to fight between themselves, or they get automatically scheduled on those days. I love that idea of picking your own time.
Yeah, I think you're talking about something that I used to be very sensitive to, is this idea of there are some roles in an organization where they have to work on a holiday or they have to be open, let's say Friday all day, right? And if you have the kind of culture that there is not one leader around in the office space or available that day, if you're working remotely, think about what that feels like, right? Where now the front desk people are quote unquote in charge only because the leaders have not shown up, not because they have any true authority, right? So let's think about the equity in that and what that means and how that feels. Doesn't feel good when everybody's leaving Friday at 3 and I'm at the front desk and I have to stay there until 5:30 to close the place. Yeah.
You know, the issue of days off more broadly also becomes it's a question of fairness versus equity. Because people with more family responsibilities and people with young children end up needing to use their time off in different ways.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's always this question of, should those people be using vacation time for parent-teacher meetings and, sick kids and things like that. And maybe somebody who doesn't live around family or doesn't have kids ends up having, more vacation time to spend on vacation, right? And how can you address that kind of issue?
Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick? I want to ask you something. I think you just brought up something really important. The difference between fairness and equity, they are not one and the same. And I think what happens is a lot of organizations and many people, and not to their own fault, just to their misunderstanding, is that, well, we're a very fair workplace here. They don't understand that fairness and equity are different. Can you both just describe, what does fairness and equity mean to you? How is it different? I think that would be important to share with everyone.
I think fairness is everybody gets the same thing. And equity is everybody gets what they need because they need it.
That's perfect.
Yeah, for me, equity is that we are all starting from the same start line, right? And so we make accommodations so that everybody has the opportunity, right? And for me, fairness is what Peter said. It's more about equality and making sure that everybody gets access to the same rules, but the same rules do not apply for everybody. And we see this a lot with paternity and maternity leave, right? Where maternity leave could be longer. Some organizations don't, well, they probably do now because this has been such a hot issue. But if men were to take off 4 months to go on paternity leave, how would that get perceived? Right. So for me, it's much more than just fairness, but making sure that we leverage where everybody starts from, or I'm not saying the right word, but that we all start from the same footing, whether or not it looks the same. We're all starting with the same footing and the same.
Right. And it goes to things like, I think, being flexible about when people work, right? At one point in time, there was an assumption that everybody had to work from 9 to 5.
Right.
I don't know why that was a rule, because it turns out it really doesn't matter.
Well, for school, I think too.
Right. Yeah.
For school. And so I think when it was created, I think it made sense. But now, we're breaking the boundaries of flexibility here today.
Yeah.
We should archive this episode.
I was in a meeting yesterday and we're scheduling something and somebody said, oh, so-and-so, works from 7 to 3. So we have to meet before 3. Oh, okay. No big deal. That's not, that's not an accommodation. That's not unreasonable. That's just the modern workplace, Yeah,
and the pandemic has helped me see how parents have to juggle so many things. Oh my. This has really been highlighted in a way that I had not seen, because much like what Peter says, when we went to work, we didn't bring our whole life. And now when I'm talking to
we didn't bring
people, I'm
any
in their living room. Yeah. I'm in their living room, so I get to see what's going on. And it is tough. It is very tough. And so this idea of 9 to 5 and you have lunch from 12 to 1, I don't know who that works for, but not many people.
No.
Yeah. So flexibility is another equity issue. We are, though, at our time. So as always, we could talk about an issue forever. But and this one was really, really interesting. So much so that we will be continuing the conversation. And in 2 weeks, we hope to have a guest. We will have a guest who is going to take us through a deeper dive into equitable practices in the workplace. So stay tuned as we continue the conversation. And do we have any takeaways, Rebecca?
My takeaway is, it seems like we keep coming back to structural care. I think this fits into some of that. And, just freedom of expression is really important. I also think that's what's going to help a lot of people break out of that social isolation that they've experienced from the pandemic and everything going on. So continue to be free, express yourself, share that joy with others, because that's what it does. It brings you joy, right?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing, that we're talking about structural care again. And you're right. I mean, the health needs, as we all kind of prepare to re-enter whatever the world is now, are going to be pretty deep. My big takeaway is that there's equity is not a hiring issue, it's embedded in operations. And there are opportunities at every single decision points to make more or less equitable choices.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. For me, I really like this idea of choosing your own holidays. I'm taking pizza day off. I am definitely. I think it's October 16 or something. Like,
Yep.
I am taking that day, the National Pizza Day off. But
That's a great
in all seriousness, this idea of let's not be afraid to think outside the box, as Renee, our viewer, helped us see. Let's think outside the box. So what, these 11 holidays, we've been giving them off forever and ever. It doesn't mean that we have to continue. I do know of a couple of organizations are doing something really interesting, and I'll leave with this thought. They are shutting down, and they're usually been doing it till the end of the year. And the reason why they're shutting down is so that everyone is on vacation and no one comes back to 800 emails. Which I think that should be an episode. But the reason for shutting down, and I understand that there are some nonprofits who would never be able to do this or think they will never be able to do this. But this idea of when we come back, sometimes that's a nightmare. Anyway, I leave you with that thought. We also wish you a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you next week on Coffee Time with Masterminds. Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.